Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 399 is not a new bill to this body. We passed it last year. And what House Bill 399 will do is it will ensure that the General Assembly has an opportunity to legislate without interference from people who wish to prevent us from doing our work on behalf of our constituents. Most of you will remember the interruption of our legislative process 2 years ago. Things got so out of hand in the gallery that many of you had your buttons pushed that day to speak, and you weren't allowed to speak because of this disruption. Each one of us represents 45,000 plus or minus people. We're the voice of our constituents. And whether I agree with the argument or not, you have that right to represent your constituents and be their voice on that topic. But that day, that didn't happen because of what occurred in the gallery. I am a staunch advocate of the First Amendment. I think it's one of our best and strongest amendments that we have in our Constitution. It is as American as it gets, is being able to have a voice amongst our government. But when you take that and you prevent a legislative body from doing its work, you cross a line. We're sent here to do the work of the people, and we should be able to do so. House Bill 399 was drawn up with three specific scenarios in mind. First, when you physically obstruct or impede a legislator or legislative employee's ability to go into a room or go from one room to another with the intent to prevent the General Assembly from conducting business, you've crossed a line. That would be a Class B felony for the first offense and a misdemeanor, and a Class A misdemeanor for the second offense. Second, when you enter into a legislative chamber or room that is set aside for use of legislators or refuse to exit, notice it doesn't say that you exit and then you're going to be charged. You're refusing to exit. They're going to ask you to leave, and if you refuse, with the intent to prevent the General Assembly from conducting business, you've crossed a line. Again, a Class B misdemeanor or a Class A misdemeanor on the second or subsequent offenses. Third, when you engage in disorderly or disruptive conduct inside a legislative building, you actually prevent the General Assembly from conducting business, you've crossed a line. When you actually prevent it from happening, not that you're attempting, but you actually prevent it from happening, it says it's a Class A misdemeanor. Now, in the original bill, it says the second offense will be a Class D felony. And I'm getting ready to yield to the gentleman from Boone 66 here in just a moment for a friendly floor amendment that is going to address some things. I've heard your voices of concerns. Well, what about out in the rotunda? What about out on the grounds? Well, we want to lay that out. We're not talking about out in the rotunda. This is the people's house. They have the right to come here and protest. That's their First Amendment right. We don't want to hinder that from happening. And I think this amendment will do that. We're going to add an extra Class A misdemeanor on the third that I talked about. Rather than going from a Class A misdemeanor to a Class D, it would be a Class A, and then a Class A, and then on third offense, it would be a Class D. But I'm going to let him go into all that. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would yield to the gentleman from Boone 66 for a friendly floor amendment. Mr. Speaker, I would like to point out that I believe it's important to enact statutes tailored to deal with the issue instead of simply relying on more general offenses such as KRS 519-020 for obstructing governmental operations, which seems more appropriate for an attempt to prevent an executive branch agency from doing its work. It's Class A misdemeanor. And in our judicial branches, judges have the power to deal with interruptions in the courtroom by use of criminal contempt proceedings if necessary. So the executive branch has protections, judicial branch has protections, and all this bill is doing is giving the legislative branch equivalent protections for the legislative branch when we're doing our work. A couple things that's been said. Oh, I don't like people's loud voices. That's not true, and I'm not afraid of loud voices. Not at all. Believe me, I've been in far worse scenarios and situations than most of you in this room. A loud voice does not scare me. Not at all, sir. Second thing, I've heard people say, oh, we're going to send people to prison for 5 years for protesting because it's a Class D felony. Not true. It's blatantly taken and putting misinformation out there. A Class D felony in Kentucky it carries 1 to 5 year penalty. Keep in mind, this would have to be a third offense. Never in the history of this Commonwealth has anybody on a nonviolent Class D felony gotten 5 years and spent 5 years in prison in Kentucky. Never has it happened. Never. As a matter of fact, you know how much time you serve if you were to get the max on a Class D felony on a nonviolent offense? 20%. Now, I'm not too smart, but my calculation of 20% of 5 is 1. 1 year. That would be what they would be looking at. So to say they're going to spend 5 years on a Class D felony is just not true. So with that, Mr. Speaker, if there's no questions, I would move passage of House Bill 399 as amended by House Committee Sub 1 and House Floor Amendment 4.